Alright everyone, some counterproductive behavior courtesy of the people at Huffington Post. Not abnormal by any means. Huffington Post is sort of like Salon in that they boil everything down to some sort of wedge issue. They want to pit people against one another because it makes for better news from the advertising standpoint. It makes them more money. But here's the thing. If you want the drug war to end in the U.S., I do. It's been counterproductive. Costs a lot of money. Your taxes go up because we're waging it. Destabilizes the border. It certainly has some involvement with the crisis there. It's responsible for so many problems that you'd think it'd be a no-brainer to end the drug war. But the problem is, those groups of people like the so-called progressives and left, which are not really the same thing anymore. It's like you got half a dozen different groups on this amalgamated general liberal front. The neo-libs, you got the business Democrats, you've got the progressives, you got the economic far left, and so forth. These people keep boiling the drug war down to a racial issue, which causes a lot of individuals who fundamentally, this would even include the alt-right, I think, essentially distrustful of government in general, at least in some ways, that might even be receptive towards the economic message of, yes, the drug war indeed has failed, and could be dragged into a pro-liberty stance on the issue, who won't touch the issue. It's too unpopular because it keeps being made racial. I think that there are people as well on the left who would love to have the sanity of ending the drug war, realize that it's basically Prohibition 2.0. It doesn't work. It's partially responsible for our police state apparatus. It's partially responsible for the overreach of surveillance. It's certainly not helpful for people in the lower and working classes who disproportionately get addicted to certain types of substances, nor to the now upper middle class that's like been totally afflicted by the opioid epidemic. It's really not helpful for anybody. It's not helpful for state governments to have to enforce it either. Some of them they drain their coffers dry. It's like here in Vermont, we don't have enough prisons. We have to pay through the nose to send them to, I think, Kentucky. And a lot of these people, what did they do? They had an ounce and a gram of marijuana, so they were labeled a dealer. Or they had some psychedelic mushrooms or something like that. It's just totally stupid. But when it's made a racial issue, some of these people on the left won't touch the issue either because they don't want the hassle of dealing with it. And it's disingenuous and false to proclaim the drug war a racial issue. 30, 40 years ago, there may have been racial animus involved in perpetuating the drug war, but the drug war didn't begin with the declaration of the drug war. It goes back to the temperance movement. It's got the same origin as Prohibition, which it had nothing to do with race. It had to do with religiosity and moralism and some upstart social movements, including the suffragette movement. It was a eugenic idea. Fundamentally, Prohibition and the drug war begin when a bunch of what then is equivalent to now soccer moms were concerned about little Jimmy not doing his studies and sniffing glue. They were concerned that their husband had a scraggly beard and drank too much and chewed tobacco. They were worried that little Sally was going to get shanghaied and turned into a Chinese sex slave because she needed her laudanum and went to the opium den or something. This is the sort of stuff that they were worried about, and this progresses through like the reefer madness era, which is totally, totally stupid. It progresses through like the hippie era where, oh, if you do LSD, you'll have holes in your brain. No, that's ecstasy. LSD makes you stare at the sun till your eyeballs melt. You know, all of these different substances over time have been compounded depending on what happens to be in vogue at the time among the population. Now it's painkillers and stuff. What is actually the problem here is simply this. You have to strip back all of the weird bias involved and just look at the sum and substance of the problem itself. It echoes Prohibition. Prohibition was put into effect, and it didn't work. It was unpopular. The drug war is increasingly unpopular. It was very expensive. It caused alcoholism to skyrocket in the United States. It didn't alleviate the problem of drunkenness. It made it much worse. Because people who before may have had a drinking problem and they'd come forward and say, well, I need some fucking help here because I'm going on 3-day long binges. Now all of a sudden they couldn't do that without risking going to jail. And so therein lies the problem. The same is true of painkillers today. It's true of crack. It's true of heroin itself. It's true of meth. It's true of all of these addictive substances. Meanwhile, we've lumped in a bunch of substances that are considerably less harmful, like marijuana, magic mushrooms. I would say LSD would be in this class. I've used it, many years ago. Never harmed me any. All of these substances, they're simply called drugs. Like marijuana has something in common with crack cocaine. No, it doesn't. Sorry, it has nothing in common with crack. It has nothing in common with heroin. There are certain classes of substances, and they should be treated differently, and instead, they're generally not. In fact, the worst of these substances, the ones that are the most likely to result, it seems at this point, in addiction, are scheduled lower than substances like marijuana or mushrooms. They're on top as the most harmful, the most addictive, the least medically relevant, and then of course they're dispensing OxyContin and Vicodin to people like candy for 20 years. And they wonder why there's now a problem and why heroin is more common too. People, they get all doped up on pills and they get addicted. Pretty soon, there's nowhere left to go but shooting some heroin or at least smoking it or something. Nothing else will suffice. Fucking taking laudanum or something. This is a problem in our society. It's getting to be a worse problem. The left would rather focus on the fact that attempts are being made to tackle the opioid addiction, which disproportionately affects some lily-white middle-class neighborhood. They would rather fixate on that than encourage the problem to be tackled in the first place. They don't want to tackle it because it's affecting white individuals. As long as it was stuff like crack, they said, oh, well, we need to feel sorry for the addicts and people, we need help, we need to have some sort of system so people can get off of this shit. Well, yeah, well, you still need that now. The fundamental solution to the drug war has always been the same and always will be. Get rid of prohibition and decriminalize these substances. Replace imprisoning people with getting them therapy and rehab, because they do work. It costs less to put somebody through rehab a dozen fucking times than to put them in prison for the average sentence for simple drug possession. It costs less to do that. It is far better, it is far more effective. You throw them in jail, use them for slave labor for a little while. Okay, maybe that's good for that state's economy. Probably not. I think it supplants actual private industry and is anti-capitalistic in form. Some people would love to say, oh, libertarians or whatever, people, limited government people love to believe in for-profit prisons. No, I don't. I don't think prisons should be profiting. It's a government-run centralized system, anathema to capitalism. It shouldn't exist. There should be no profit motive in prisons whatsoever. Both from the justice system and economic standpoint, it is the reverse of what libertarianism is actually about. You're thinking of corporatism. You're thinking of neocons and neoliberals, which is why the Republicans and Democrats agree the drug war needs to continue, because they get kickbacks from these corporations. Now, we need to eliminate the drug war, decriminalize these substances, and get people treated. And we also need to lean on the medical apparatus to stop giving out painkillers every time somebody stubs their toe, because that's a big part of the problem. And it's not the doctor's fault. It's the fault of the pharma companies and the executives of these places that didn't want to deal with some whining patient who wanted their pain to go away. They didn't want to give them any other form of treatment, let alone give them a joint. Because trust me, that's going to make them forget about that stubbed toe really fast. They're not going to care. They could also drink. You know, it's perfectly legal. Someone gets an injury. They're like, well, I'm not using painkillers. Perfectly legal for them to drink to alleviate their pain, or at least forget about it, which is a long human tradition. Perfectly legal. Perfectly wonderful according to the medical establishment. But God forbid they should smoke a bong. God forbid they should acquire some of that devil's lettuce or anything like that. It's totally dumb. And it has nothing to do with race. There are plenty of people of all races that are addicted to hard drugs, and there are plenty of people from all races that smoke weed occasionally. Just like drinking or smoking tobacco or something like that. You know, if the scheduling is going to rely upon a combination of harm and addiction, you'd think that tobacco and alcohol would be banned outright and marijuana would be fully legal. Oddly enough. Now, I don't believe in banning any of these. I wouldn't ban tobacco or alcohol either. They should be legal for adults to ingest as well. And you know, good luck trying to ban them, by the way, at this point. You'd have a civil war, probably. You'd have a tobacco war, an alcohol war, or something. But these other substances, some of them are less harmful than either of those and far less addictive. Magic mushrooms, they're reverse addictive. You take those, for those that don't know, you take psilocybin and for a week or so after, you don't feel like taking psilocybin again. Your body tells you not to do it because it's convinced that you've been mildly poisoned. It's a biochemical reaction that happens almost 100% of the time. You take Morning Glory or LSD or some substances like that, and there's a cooldown period where if you take it again, the effect is weaker or absent for some weeks potentially afterwards. I found for Morning Glory it can be as long as a month, although I didn't notice any cooldown for myself with LSD, oddly enough. I used it 2 days in a row and the effects were just as great. Then you've got the hard substances that, yeah, I mean, nobody should be peddling them. I think that if it's just simple possession, somebody has a couple crack rocks, I wouldn't want to throw them in jail. I'd want to get them into rehab, and it should be involuntary rehab if they're actively using those substances. Even if it fails 3 or 4 times, still cheaper. You're going to have a lot fewer addicts on the streets. You will save a huge amount of money in policing. You will save a huge amount of money in the court system, which costs a lot. Public defendants being supplied to all of these addicts constantly, dragging them through court for weeks at a time. Imprisonment, you'd save so much money you couldn't even believe it on that. And you would reduce the need for militarized police. I would think the left would like that. I would think at this point the right wing would like that too. Save a shit ton of money, put it into tax relief. Doesn't matter what bracket you're relieving, relieve them all. Lower taxes by a couple of points across the board if you end the drug war. That's how much it costs. We spend more on the drug war than the average nation does on an actual war that it's waging at any given moment in time. It's totally stupid. It doesn't work. There's the real problem, though. Past any moral argument, past anything else, it simply hasn't worked. It's been in full swing for decades and decades, and we've got more addiction now than ever. I would think at some point you would want to switch tactics. How about we try what's been tried before in other nations and worked, which is decriminalize them, get people into treatment. I'm not saying full legalization. I'm not saying, oh, well, it's okay if someone wants to shoot heroin on the sidewalk and out in front of their home. I'm saying that if they're addicted, they need rehab. If they're not addicted and they're just sort of dicking, they're smoking a joint, they took mushrooms a couple times, I wouldn't do anything. As long as they're not getting behind the wheel of a car or wandering around in public speaking gibberish or something, I don't really care. They're on their own land. Let them use whatever they want to use. Also, Twain with this. If you want to break the cycle of addiction, here's another proposal. Ban businesses from drug testing. And the reason for that is this. If someone is showing up to work clearly inebriated, that's a problem. Yeah, but then again, it would be a problem if it were a legal substance like alcohol or tobacco, either. If they're like, they stuck 5 Nicorette patches on their forehead before work and they're all fucked up or they're hungover or drunk, that can be a problem. The reason why is this, though. Some people won't seek work because they're so addicted. They know they'll get drug tested. Their options of where to work are more limited. But the problem is sometimes if they had a better life and they had, better form of employee, some of these are intelligent individuals who just got caught up in addiction. Some of these people, they have like fucking master's degrees and stuff like that. Then they would be able to get potentially a good job and they would have more of a safety net in their lives. I think that has something to do with, this is the way we treat mental illness. We don't simply throw somebody in jail for being crazy and then deprive them of their entire social network, put a scarlet letter on their chest, and then send them back out into the world so that they can go try and fail to get a job over and over. We don't do that to people who are mentally ill, and addiction is fundamentally a mental illness. Some people struggle with it more than others. Some people have become addicted to different substances that have different, responses. Different levels of addiction. There's habituation and there's chemical dependency. That's a differentiation you have to obviously have. For instance, with marijuana, there's really no chemical dependency with it. You can become habituated in the same way you would with cigarettes, but minus the chemical dependency, so it's easier to stop. Like myself, I spend months drinking heavily. But recently I quit drinking, and I feel just fine. Because for me, personally, it doesn't cause chemical dependency. It's really just, I don't know, I like to drink and then listen to music because it sounds better to me. But I don't have a problem quitting, but some people do. Some people have a big problem quitting because they start using it because they're stressed out or something. They're trying to take care of their stress. They're trying to alleviate some problem in their life. If you're just doing it for entertainment, your results might, I guess, typically be better than if you're using it to block out negative emotions. If you're doing that, that's, by the way, something you probably shouldn't be doing. You should look for something else to alleviate your stress. Become a workaholic. Trust me, it works. You'll make better inroads into the world if you do that. You sit there at midnight editing occult manuscripts. It's fairly self-explanatory that you can capitalize upon that. But sometimes people end up addicted. They're no real fault of their own. They just lack a social structure. They don't have anybody to tell them to stop. And so what would be a once-in-a-while sort of entertaining thing, oh yeah, I took LSD the other day, it was pretty cool, and watched Alice in Wonderland, turns into a never-ending binge of drugs, and then they end up wrapped up in other crime. Hopefully, and stop people from getting to that next level where they're indulging in other things, and they're breaking into somebody's house or stealing somebody's purse to feed their addiction, or stealing, pill bottles from their friends or something. But we can't do that right now because we got a fucking drug war waging. It doesn't make any sense. Not gonna work, never will work. That's about all. Peace out.